Welcome to another episode of Breaking Battlegrounds with your host Chuck Warren. I'm Sam Stone. As always, jumping right into it, our first guest up today is Jason Willick. He writes a regular Washington Post column on legal issues, political ideas, and foreign affairs. Prior to the Post, he was an editorial writer and assistant editorial features editor for the Wall Street Journal. Jason Willick, thank you for joining us once again, and welcome back to the program.
So great to be here. Thanks, guys.
I have a quick question work-wise. What's the difference between doing an opinion pieces for the Washington Post versus the Wall Street Journal? Is the process still the same, or is there a little bit difference? What could you tell our audience about that?
It's pretty similar. I mean, I do similar things. I read a column at the Washington Post, so that's under my own name. And at the Wall Street Journal, I was an editorial writer, so I was mainly writing in the institutional voice. So that's somewhat different in terms of topics and tone.
What's the big difference between the editorial staff of the Wall Street Journal and the actual reporters? Is there quite a bit of divide in the outlook of the world?
Well, gosh, at the Wall Street Journal, I was there 4 years ago. I left. I came here to the Post 4 years ago, so I don't really know. Everyone was great to me at the Wall Street Journal. Right. And both, especially I played on the softball team, which I think I was the only person on the editorial page on the softball team.
Who's the best softball player?
Besides you.
I was definitely not. Probably the guys from the sports desk. You could tell who covered baseball, and they probably played in high school, maybe even in college.
Oh, that's cheating. I don't think they should be even allowed in that one.
Exactly.
They got to play the sports, from the New York Post or something.
Well, look, let's start. You had a great piece on April 12th in the Washington Post. Trump wants a bigger military. Congress should attach one condition. So Trump wants a $1.5 trillion budget, which would be about 4.5 to 5% of our GDP, okay, which he's asking all the NATO allies to do, so it's basically what he's increasing it to. You're not arguing here against this budget, but you're saying there needs to be a condition to it. What is that condition, and why do we need it?
Yeah, so I'm basically trying to grapple with, we need a big military to meet all of our obligations. We can't, with a small military, maintain the kind of alliances that we built all over the world. It's hard enough to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. What about defending NATO's eastern flank? What about defending Japan, the Philippines, maybe Taiwan from China? It takes a lot of military power to protect this post-1945 alliance structure we have. But if the president controls it all by himself, that's not great, and that's not what the founders intended. They meant to split control of the military between Congress and the executive. And that's not really working. We increasingly see just sort of the president directing the military however he wants, even though the Constitution gives the Congress various powers over the military, including the power to raise armies, the power to declare war. And it is still raising armies. It's appropriating a big military, but once it does, it's sort of up to the president to use it how he wants. So the condition I would want is, look, we'll give you these new weapons, but you can't use them for an undeclared, unauthorized war that's not in, to repel an imminent attack. Sure, if you're repelling an imminent attack, you don't have time, whatever. But you can't just, float around using this however we want without congressional authorization. So I'm trying to think of ways that you could force the president to, once again, as used to be the case, basically get a declaration of war from Congress as the Constitution intended and as the founders wanted him to have to do.
Isn't this also, though, so it's already in the Constitution. So what it seems to me is Congress is not taking the bull by the horns and demanding it. I mean, what more can you add that's there? They have control of the purse, supposed to have, but they just seem everybody can say, well, Trump just runs roughshod over the Republicans, but Democrats did the same. Obama, Biden did the same thing.
Libya, Obama, undeclared war in Libya, yeah.
So, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, Sam, like right now, Trump should go to Congress. I mean, after 30 days, I think he should have gone to Congress. Yeah. That's our 2 cents, right? And I'm very supportive of this effort, but I think you got to go to Congress and get the buy-in, right? But what do you think Congress can do now? Because that's supposed to be their responsibility now. I know they keep bringing up this vote about but for Democrats, it's just a political ploy. It's not serious policy.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, you're asking how could you have teeth on something like this? And that's a good question, because it could be that, whatever Congress does, the president just still keeps acting the same way. Presidents of both parties, like you said. what Congress's real power is that, and the way it basically works now, to the extent Congress is buying, it's the president goes to war and Congress either cuts off funding for it or doesn't. But and not in Korea, famously, the Korean War is the biggest war the U.S. has fought. Tens of thousands of deaths, huge, large war without congressional approval, but Congress funded the war over the course of months and years. Um, so I'm trying to sort of tie Congress's power of the purse, which is its only real power it has to get the executive to do what it wants. Otherwise, it's just saying stuff. But the power of the purse, it's the only one that can raise money and appropriate money. The executive can't do that by himself. So, so I'm trying to say Congress could write into its appropriations bill restrictions
Right.
on the use of these weapons. Now, again, maybe that would be ignored somehow. There's fights over appropriations. Maybe the president would say it's unconstitutional, infringes on his commander-in-chief power, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm trying to get Congress to think about ways. Look, if you're going to grow the military, at least use that opportunity to also try to restore the shared constitutional power over it.
Jason, we're talking to Jason Willick. You can follow him on X at JA Willick. Jason, is what you're talking about, though, it's kind of a symptom of a much larger problem in Washington where the balance of power has been skewed by Congress's abrogation of its duties. They've turned regulatory their role in regulatory matters over to the agencies. They've abdicated military responsibility to the president over and over. This is a pattern where Congress has not taken up the mantle of its full job.
Yeah. No, Congress is not performing as well as it used to, and there's various reasons for that. Maybe they're not getting paid enough. Maybe their staff isn't getting paid enough. Maybe people don't have time for it. Maybe it's the Senate filibuster that means, and I've
Right.
frankly come around on that, where I used to think the Senate filibuster was a good idea to check temporary majorities, but now I think, hey, if Congress can't do anything with 60 votes, don't we at least
Right.
to do
Right.
something? Um, so there's various reasons for Congress why Congress is like this: primaries, polarization, et cetera, et cetera. It is a symptom, but these things go in cycles, and you might see a change in 10 years, 5 years. Who knows?
Yeah, sadly, I don't see this being a cycle because
Hmm.
let's say Trump leaves, okay, which he's going to leave, okay, and a
Mhm.
Democrat's going to elect him, which is going to happen. I mean, we're all at the age enough we're going to see another Republican, another
Or
Democrat,
right.
whatever. I don't get the sense Democrats, they say they love democracy, but they're very unilateral and everything. It's just groupthink through bureaucracy, right?
Right, right, right.
Um,
No, I mean,
I think look. I think this is a serious matter. You're talking to a room here. We are strong. We would be considered hawks. I'm more neocon than Sam, but we're hawks. Okay, you probably are that way
But
too.
we're also constitutional
Right.
originalists
And so,
when it
for
comes
example,
to governing.
For example, I mean, there has to be something. So, for example, let's go and say we have to put a force in Haiti, which Sam and I think needs to be done somehow. I mean, that we're just ignoring this blind spot of terrorist activity down there. It seems like you have to go to Congress if you've done any type of military action after 30 days, say yes or no. Are we doing this or not? And if no, then I have 30 days to withdraw. There's something that has to be done because I agree because it's not just this isn't anti-Trump. This is just like power goes to people's head. Power corrupts. And I don't want any president having this unlimited power with clearly the strongest military in the world. Now, I know regarding Iran, supposedly our stockpiles are getting lower because Iran. And, I think your article you wrote they're a second, third rate power. They're really not. Matter of fact, Iran's probably stronger than most European militaries. But that being said, one thing Trump's going to do is, they're talking to U.S. automakers now about production. I mean, Trump will leave whether he leaves at 20% rating or 45%. The military is going to be stronger. Our military infrastructure is going to be stronger. Period. So you're really equipping the next president with a whole new set of powers. Should there be a time limit in appropriation bills that's saying any military action after 30 days you have to come get approval for future funding on it?
So the War Powers Act, which is the 30 days, that's where it comes from. In 1976, after Vietnam, Congress tried to do something like this with the War Powers Act. I think it's 60 days, and then there's a 30-day extension the president can get, so it really becomes 90 days. Of course, what's interesting about the War Powers Act is it used to be that Congress could vote to end by concurrent resolution. It could end the military engagement by majority vote in both houses. Now the president and the president couldn't veto it. Now the Supreme Court has ruled in a later case called INS v. Chadha that those concurrent resolutions, not on the War Powers Act, but in general, basically, are unconstitutional. So now you need a 2/3 majority in both houses of Congress to stop a military action. But the War Powers Act still does, like you said, impose some restrictions. 60 days, Congress is supposed to approve it. 90 days. Then the president can say after 90 days, well, the war's over. We're just doing cleanup. It's not really hostilities. So that bill was written. It's turned out to be pretty ineffectual, that bill, the War
Right.
Powers Act. That's why I'm thinking about tying it explicitly to the weapons that Congress gives the president. And so it's within their funding power. So it's not just like we think,
Right.
the president should do this. And, that will be hard too. I'm not saying that wouldn't have its own problems of implementation and compliance and maybe constitutionality. But the War Powers Act, the law professor Jack Goldsmith called it Swiss cheese. It was an effort post-Vietnam, and it's sort of failed. And if anything, it's kind of had distorting effects because it pressures the president to just maybe go to war and finish it in 60 days or like use overwhelming force over 60 days instead of, even if it would be smarter strategically, that a 100-day campaign or whatever. So it's just kind of, not a great
That's a
law,
great
not a
point.
great success.
I haven't heard anyone else make that
No.
point, and that is a great point because it does seem like this Iran operation was rushed at the start, and now they're scrambling to figure out after their initial strategy
but
kind of
I
bogged
disagree
down
with
how
that.
to handle it.
My understanding is clearly from people in the know is that this was planned over several months. So this wasn't like he woke up one morning. It sounded like a Haiti tweet. I mean, he woke up. This was planned.
Yeah, but
And you
it's
can
gone
t-
off the rails, right? I mean,
I
that's
don't even know about that. I think again, people mistake an ideological regime. They think they're dealing with someone that has some common sense there, and I don't think
And
this
you're
regime
not.
has. Yeah,
You're
and
not.
and that's always a miscalculation we do in the Middle East.
right.
Yeah.
We're going to be coming back with more from Jason Willick here in just a moment, folks. Stay tuned. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back. But first, if you are not already, go to breakingbattlegrounds.vote, sign up for our podcast, sign up for all the extra content you can get through our Substack. We're on Substack, Spotify, everywhere you get your favorite content. Breaking Battlegrounds is there. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. This is Chuck Warren and Sam Stone. Today with our guest, Jason Willick. He is with the Washington Post. And, folks, did you know private student loan debt in the United States is $300 billion? That's with a B, $300 billion. And about $45 billion of that is labeled as distress, which means they're behind on their loan. And if you've ever been behind on a loan, you want to avoid the mailbox, wherever the case may be. Well, why refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch? They provide you with a custom loan payment based on your ability to pay. So whatever you're agreeing to now, but you need to lower it, get a lower interest, Why Refi can do that. Why Refi is not a debt settlement company. They work with each borrower individually, tailoring each loan to each borrower's specific situation. You will not be calling some faceless call center in India or Philippines. So Why Refi can reduce your monthly payment and guarantee interest rates under 6%. You're probably paying double interest rates now for that. So, folks, this will help with affordability and financial relief. And best part, Why Refi does not care about your credit score. They just want to help you make it a payment arrangement to pay off your loan. So if you'd like more information, go look up Why Refi, YREFY.com, or call them 877-400-9989 and tell them Sam and Chuck sent you. We're back with Jason Willick. Sham, go ahead.
Jason, right before we went to break, we were talking about everything. Obviously, you have a great piece out about what Trump wants a bigger military, but Congress should attach a condition that puts them back in the driver's seat somewhat. Is the Trump administration doing a good enough job of selling what they're doing in Iran to Congress and to the American people? Or do they need to step up on that? Because right now, I think there's a lot of confusion. Even Chuck and I obviously disagree on how that war is progressing.
I mean, your question answers itself. I think they're not doing a good enough job. And I mean, they've been very executive centric. They haven't seemed all too worried about getting Congress on board with a lot of what they're doing, because they're doing a lot of it just through the executive agencies. And this is one place where, presidents find it a nuisance to have to go to Congress, but it can help you explain things, and it can force you to figure out what the what you're going to do if this, because you're going to face counter arguments and you're going to answer them, and and it might help you develop your strategy and make better policy. At least that's the premise of our democratic government, is that debating things in a representative body yields better policy than just doing them unilaterally. So he hasn't done a good job. But on the other hand, seems like he's wrapping up the war, and in part because of that political pressure, because he knows that it's not super popular. But anyway, hasn't been doing a great job. I mean, the State of the Union was right before the Iran strikes began, and he barely touched on Iran in the State of the Union.
Yep.
I'm playing amateur psychologist here, okay? But I really believe, to a degree, he thinks their chances of keeping Congress are very slim. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but very slim, especially on the House side. And I think Donald Trump's thinking purely legacy. I think he thinks, if I clean up Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, what are people going to say 10, 20 years? And all due respect, if they're free in 10 or 20 years, you have to give him
a lot of credit.
Yeah. I mean, he changed the world. And frankly, he put China on their heels with this military, with this critical mineral strategy, with these three countries. I mean, it's a game changer for legacy. And I think legacy matters to Donald Trump. Anybody puts his name on a bunch of buildings cares about
I
legacy.
think it'll matter a lot who follows him in office and how they follow up on it.
Yeah, and he probably is praying for Marco, to be honest with you. All right, let's talk about something you brought up, which had not been on our radar, but it's true. The filibuster. So I go back and forth on this, because I always know your party's not going to be in the majority. But nothing is getting done. I mean, this is just ridiculous. And I don't know if you go and say the filibuster has to be a voice. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this, Jason?
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I thought Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin were heroes in the Biden administration for blocking the rewrite of election laws from coast to coast, basically, by Chuck Schumer nuking the filibuster. They said, no, we're not going to do that. I thought that was great. I mean, and the Democrats had only 50 votes and wanted to do it with 50 votes plus one. My view has changed somewhat, not just because I'm more likely to agree with the Republican Congress, but because structurally, as we were talking about in the segment about Iran, Congress isn't doing enough stuff. And so I actually wrote a piece called "How Trump Changed My Mind" on the Senate filibuster, which is like, now I don't necessarily want it because I want Trump to get what he wants through Congress per se, but I want there to be a process in Congress. And I do think the presence of the filibuster is an excuse, at least, for an administration to say, we're not going to get 60 votes on that. We'll just see no point trying legislating. Because people don't know, the filibuster requires 60 votes for most legislation. You could do tax stuff and reconciliation. But most votes require 60. Most laws require 60 votes, and that is a real barrier. It's good in that the idea is it forces bipartisan compromise. You can't just do things with your own party. You need a handful of senators on the other side. That's great, but we're in a place where Congress is becoming so irrelevant that I'm weighing the pluses and benefits way differently to me. I think there's a difference between how Democrats and Republicans use it. Like, Democrats would try, because we think of the other point that I would say is, already the filibuster was nuked in 2013 by Harry Reid for nominees. So you only need 50 votes to get your guy or your woman into the role.
Right.
So you can get very aggressive people into the executive branch, but it's just really hard to legislate. So I think that's something else that makes it asymmetrical and sort of tilts things toward doing everything through the executive branch. So that's why, I think there's an institutionalist case, for nuking the filibuster. It would actually be good for the Senate if more stuff could go through it.
Well, I was trying to think right now while you were talking about this, is there been a vote in the last 4 or 5 years where I can remember, other than the Manchin Sinema, one where on a substantive issue that wasn't just a continuing resolution or similar, where there were multiple senators on either side of the aisle who crossed on any issue of substance? I don't remember that any time in the last few years.
No, there's not many. I mean, every
there
side.
was the CHIPS Act. The CHIPS Act.
True. You have one or two. You usually have one, two, maybe three. I mean, that's basically where you're at. But the reality is, Congress is not working.
Yeah.
Now, maybe what you do, now I would be okay with this. Eliminate the filibuster for anything eliminate the filibuster for single subject bills.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it that way. So let's go and say we need voter ID. Let's just use an example.
Good idea.
The filibuster can be eliminated for single subject because people can't go and say, well, it's this reason or that reason. That's why these debates, because they always give excuses on both sides. Just say single subject bill, voter ID, single subject bill, no taxes on tips, things of that nature. Maybe that's the way to do it so people see some movement.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good idea. You could also, I think one thing that Republicans are talking about with the standoff over ICE and DHS funding is eliminate it for appropriations if people are going to obstruct appropriations. I don't know. There's various limited ways you could do it. But the truth is, as it gets more and more eliminated, at some point it's just going to disappear. I mean, one thing I guess I've been more wondering is Republicans say, well, if we get rid of the filibuster, Democrats will pack the Supreme Court and add states and stuff. And it's like, you think if they're prepared to pack the Supreme Court, they're not prepared to nuke the filibuster?
Right.
100%.
Right.
100%.
Right.
100%.
No, absolutely. Jason Willick, thank you so much for joining us once again. Really love having you on the program. Folks, follow him on X at J.A. Willick, and obviously highly recommend subscribing to the Washington Post. It is, regardless of what you think, it is great and important content for every person in this country to keep up with. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back with more in just a moment. All right, welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. Up next, special segment in the main show today. It's time for Bee's Corner.
Hello.
Have we figured out the name yet? Is it Bee's Corner, Brennan's Corner?
We're struggling with this, folks.
Bee's Corner's kind of sticking.
Is it sticking?
That's what's sticking.
Okay.
So it's ready for swag. The swag hat, Bee's Corner, the T-shirt, the dog dishes, the leashes, Bee's
Yeah,
Corner, Bee's
get
Corner.
your
We're going to have to be creative on that merch, though. Like, look, bumblebees sell.
Yeah.
You're a native. You have a house in Salt Lake. The best branding in minor league baseball was the Salt Lake Bees.
Yeah, they are.
They sell a ton of hats.
They do. They do.
Ooh, Bee's Crime.
Oh.
I think that's it. On air, too.
Bee's Crime.
It's gotta
Bee's
be
Crime.
a good one.
All right, Bee's Crime. What do we got today?
Okay, so this one's really sad. This is the Athena Strand case. A FedEx driver in Texas back in 2022, his name is Tanner Horner, went to go deliver Athena's Christmas present, and she was waiting outside on the driveway, and he just snatched her right up. There is now court cases going on to, determine if he's going to get the death penalty or prison for life. And, they released the videos from the truck itself and the audio from him killing her and him raping her and all that. And
folks, I mean, we're discussing this because first of all, I don't know why there is a discussion whether he should get life in prison or death penalty. Someone like look, this stuff does not stop until these people start being put down.
Right.
And people say, well, does that work? Okay, well, let's use the example of Washington, D.C. They're averaging over 220 plus murders a year. Trump sends in the National Guard. He puts a new, what do you call? Is it a
special prosecutor?
Special prosecutor out there. 42. I think it's 42 or
42.
42 murders this year. So don't tell me these
down.
things.
I mean, it's stunning.
Don't tell me these things don't have an effect on crime.
No, they absolutely do. And this is a case, we've talked about this before, when there is not a shadow of a doubt, when you have evidence from the truck, from those cameras, all the DNA, everything else, I do not believe this should take years to get to this point.
Absolutely
This
not.
guy should have been executed in public.
I agree.
6 months after this crime.
It's beyond reasonable doubt. The family had to leave when they played the audio, did they not?
Yeah, they had to leave. And you even hear the little girl saying, "Are you a kidnapper?" Like a 7-year-old little girl asking you, "Are you a kidnapper?" Well, yeah. And he just kept distracting her by talking about school and family and yeah. And then he tried to say that he hit her with the truck, he thought, and that's why he put her in there in the first place, and that he strangled her, but the audio also showed he didn't. He bashed her head in.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm totally okay with bringing back public
I
execution
think
for
we
this stuff.
should.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Middle of the dang town square.
Same thing with school shooters.
Yep.
The fact it's 2026 and this happened in 2022 and they let that much time go by.
Well, it
That much
robs.
evidence.
So with all these copycats and these people who see these crimes and then they go out, like Koberger was a great example that we talked about on this show, where he was obsessed with crime and wanted to commit it and blah, blah, blah. They don't see the consequence because the consequence is so far down the road.
Why? So how long? So does this go to jury now or the judge for determining life in prison or death penalty? Do you know?
I believe it's jury.
And when does that happen? When do they make that decision?
I think there's one more court date coming up.
So what have they been doing for 3 years? They've had them on camera.
That's literally, yeah.
But that's how long it takes literally just to get a capital case through the system anymore.
You know, what should be done is we need to add more judges that only handle capital cases.
Right. Well, and again, you should have a different standard for a case like this where it is zero doubt. Zero.
Yeah. 100% zero doubt.
When you have a case like this with zero doubt, there should be an expedited process that ends with a public execution. The crime needs to be attached to the punishment.
I agree.
This gives it, people are saying too, a lot of time for people to go back and say, oh, well, I'm a changed man. I found God. Like, everything's okay now. I've atoned for my sins, and
There's
pull
no
that
atoning
card.
for that.
Exactly. So
You raped and murdered a 7-year-old
Yeah.
girl.
Well, the standard should be give your heart to God, but your butt's mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fine.
Right?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I mean, I was literally on the plane last night coming back from a meeting with some venture capitalists in California, and I was just tearing up reading this.
It's awful.
And I didn't even listen to audio, but I could hear this young girl's voice.
Oh my gosh, the audio's breaking. Yeah.
It's hideous. The whole thing is hideous. Yeah, I hope
All right,
this guy fries.
So B's murder. I think that's where we're at.
He's crime.
B's crime.
B's crime. B's crime. All right, I love it. I love it.
All right, Breaking Battlegrounds is going to be coming back with more here in just a moment, folks. Make sure you're tuning in. We're on the way.
All right, Rudy, how you doing?
Remember your dreams, your future, your education? Has private student loan debt destroyed those dreams? It doesn't have to. Y-Refi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can save you thousands of dollars, get you custom payments that you can afford, and they don't care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call Y-Refi today.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. We are ourselves welcoming back Dan McLaughlin. He is a senior writer at National Review Online, a fellow at the National Review Institute, also a longtime friend of this program. He was one of our very first guests.
And still the best.
Back in the day.
And still the best.
Dan McLaughlin, welcome back to the program.
Glad as always to be here.
Hey, so we had a conversation earlier with Jason Willick of the Washington Post, and we somehow got into talking about filibuster from Iran. And, being conservatives, we've really been protective of the filibuster. But it doesn't seem like Congress gets anything done. And we talked about maybe should we have eliminate the filibuster for single subject items like, voter ID or something. What are your thoughts on you're an attorney. What are your thoughts on the filibuster right now and what's going on in Washington?
I mean, a couple of things. First of all, I've written a good deal about this. I mean, I think the filibuster is still much more beneficial to conservatives than it is harmful. And so, part of being conservatives is that we understand that we work with general rules that favor us more often than not, and we live with the consequences of the fact that sometimes, in individual situations, those rules work against us, and that's fine. because it it's the long view. Um, I do. First of all, in terms of the single subject bills, I mean, I would like to see more single subject bills, but a single subject rule, which they do have in some states, right,
Okay.
state legislatures, but it can be very um, uh, hard to police exactly what is and isn't a single subject. I mean, even something like the the Save Act, Save America Act. I mean, it was originally a bill only to deal with proof of citizenship for voter registration, and then they tacked on a voter ID thing, and then, well, is that two subjects?
Yeah.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What I would actually rather see in terms of subject limitations, things I've long wished we could see more of is, you know, uh, dividing up like the budget bills by department and function rather than having these giant one-time only omnibus. I mean that itself is partly dictated by the reconciliation rules,
Correct.
which are a little bit weird and counterintuitive and not totally transparent to the average citizen why it is that it works this way. But I'm not necessarily in favor of more rules that are like that, more rules that put power in the hands of like the Senate parliamentarian in ways that are not really understandable by the ordinary voter. I think the general 60 vote threshold is a rule that is understandable, and people understand, the average voter understands that, okay, you need a certain number of votes, and that means either your party needs to elect 60 senators, or you need to put pressure on people in the other party, or you need to cut a deal with people in the other party in one way or the other. Those are the rules. Now, obviously, as I said, there are exceptions to those rules for certain types of tax and budget bills that go through the reconciliation process. But I think in general, as conservatives, we should be trying to defend the rules of the system, the rules of the game, and it doesn't mean we don't fight hard within those rules. But I think on balance, we benefit from knowing where the yard lines and the out of bounds are.
What I guess my argument back to that, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, is the filibuster's gone the minute the Democrats have 51 votes. So why are we holding up a major legislative agenda now, just to roll over and let them do whatever they want when they have a Democrat president and 51 members of the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely going to take a shot at getting rid of the filibuster the next time they're in power. They took a shot at it last time and they failed. And we should think about why that is, right? It wasn't just because they had two members of their caucus, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, who were willing to fight it. I think anecdotally, I think there was a lot of people who suspected there were other Senate Democrats who really did not want to do away with the filibuster, but they were happy to let Manchin and Sinema take the spear for that. But obviously, you would have to smoke those people out. But it is politically painful for the Democrats to do that, right? I mean, they drove Manchin and Sinema out of the party. They lost Manchin's seat, which they probably won't get back anytime soon.
No.
They came pretty close to losing Sinema's seat, and only managed to salvage it because the Republicans were running Carrie Lake. I think against a sort of generic Republican, that Senate seat probably would have gone red as well. When Harry Reid did the end of the judicial filibuster, or mostly the end of it, that McConnell ended up killing off the rest later on. But, Harry Reid made this big move in 2013, and the Democrats went on the next year to lose 9 Senate seats. And 8 of those are still in Republican hands 12 years later. So, I think we underestimate, I think, in talking about the Democrats wanting to do this, how politically painful it is. When you look at the map of the Senate, the simple fact is they can only get like 38 Senate seats in blue states, right? They currently hold 37 of those. They'll probably take out Susan Collins to get the 38th this year, but they might not. Collins is a very hard target, and they're running some really dreadful candidates against her.
Yes.
They got to choose between the Nazi tattoo guy and the
by the way,
elderly governor.
By the way, if Planter was a Republican, could you imagine the full-time press and push on him from CNN and MSNBC?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's startling how bad they are at this.
And instead, he gets soft-focused profiles.
Right.
Oh, here's the guy who's going to bring manly men back to the Democratic fold, as if it's just sort of your ordinary dude who has the Nazi insignia tattooed on his chest in permanent ink,
and praises Islamic terrorists and Hamas military tactics.
Yeah. So, but the reality is, though, they can only get 38 senators out of the blue states, right? So, to get to 50, to get to 51, which they would need now to control the Senate, but even to get to 50, they'd need 12 senators from states that Trump won in 2024, some of which are still fairly blue-leaning states like Nevada, but, those are competitive seats. And not all those people want to walk the plank for a full, left-wing agenda.
Right.
Some of them will anyway, because that's just,
Who they
Nancy
are.
Pelosi was always, frankly, brilliant at convincing members in swing districts that it was worth throwing their careers away to vote for whatever it was that the progressives wanted at a particular time.
Right.
But it is hard to do that in the Senate.
So, let me switch topics here. You wrote a great piece entitled "The Futility of Arguing About Trump," and I think this is so timely. I just, I have some friends this morning that were complaining about his comments about the Pope and his meme, and I just said, why do you let him break your brain? I mean, why he is what he is. I mean, we just got to get off this personality thing about arguing who Trump is. What are your
right? I mean, I think it's still worth. If you're complaining about something specifically he's doing that's politically counterproductive, because I think the fight with the Pope is that more than it's just Trump being rude.
Agreed.
And it's worth in analyzing how he exercises power to notice that, his character plays into that. But I think this overall broader question of, is Donald Trump an appropriate person to be president? Like, should this guy be president? It's a little late for that. We've been arguing about that for 10 years. Everybody said everything that could be said about it. He's been elected twice. He can't run again. He turns 80 in like 6 weeks from now. Trump, it's worth arguing over how Trump exercises the power of the presidency. But I think the question, and it's worth arguing also over, hey, the next time we're picking a next guy, maybe there are some aspects of Trump that we shouldn't want to imitate, right? Even if you say, because I understand a lot of people will say, it's not good when Trump does this or that, but he delivers, so I put up with it. Okay, if those are things you're just putting up with, then maybe the next time around we shouldn't look for a candidate who does that kind of stuff.
I don't think you need to look very far. There's a guy who has spent some time in a lot of memes slumped on a couch sitting right beside him ready to go.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think we'll have some choices in 2028. I mean, Vance will run unless he has a very serious falling out with Trump. Rubio has said that he won't run if Vance is running. Now, that's the kind of promise that is the oldest lie in Washington. Everybody lies about when they're going to run and when they're not going to run. And I mean, Rubio retired from the Senate 10 years ago, and somehow he's still in business, right? But he may well be thinking, look, he went up against the buzzsaw of Trump once. If Trump is fully behind Vance, he may not want to fight that fight. But if Rubio doesn't, we'll still have probably Ted Cruz or somebody will run. And then, if Vance really loses favor with Trump, then I think it's quite likely that we see Rubio get in. But in any event, I mean, even Vance, and I'm the furthest thing from a fan of Vance, but there are a number of the unsavory characteristics of Trump and his personality that Vance doesn't have.
Right.
Correct.
He's not as bombastic. He's a family man. He's religious. He's a military veteran.
I don't see him as having helped himself thus far in Trump's term. And Rubio has tremendously. I even, talking to Democrats, they'll say, well, Rubio's the only guy I trust there. That's a big step.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Rubio has done almost nothing but burnish his image in office, and Vance has just stepped in a bunch of different minefields. Some of them things that were not his doing.
Correct.
Right. He didn't, he didn't cause his good friend Tucker Carlson to lose his marbles, although it's Vance's own choice how far he sticks with him. But one way or the other, he's stuck with the problem that he's trying to stay loyal to both Trump and Tucker while they're at war with each
Dan, let
other.
me ask you a question, because I'm sure you know a number of people who have a good relationship with Tucker Carlson. What do they think about his metamorphosis here? I mean, what are they saying? I mean, I know some people that actually work for him, and they're just baffled by it. What are you hearing about that from just people who know him or worked with him?
Yeah, you may be overrating exactly how close I am to people who are how close to him. But, I mean, certainly I know people who used to either respect Tucker or at least tolerate him, who are just baffled by all of this. And clearly Donald Trump is one of them.
Yeah.
Trump was saying nice things about Tucker and meeting with Tucker well after a lot of this craziness comes out, in part because Trump doesn't pay as careful attention to this stuff. I mean, there's a reason Trump had Nick Fuentes at Mar-a-Lago, right? Because he had no idea who the guy was,
right.
And Kanye shows up with a dinner guest, and okay, but now that it's on Trump's radar that Tucker is really going after him, he's doing his Trump thing. But yeah, I mean, and look, Vance is suffering some of the problems that Kamala Harris and plenty of other vice presidents have had. I mean, there is a reason why, if you go all the way back to the beginnings of the Republic, traditionally the next in line was the Secretary of State and not the vice president, right? In the early days, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, those guys, John Quincy Adams, because the Secretary of State gets to do stuff and also gets to not do stuff.
Right,
whereas the vice president is involved in everything and in charge of nothing, right? Which is a terrible place to be, particularly when your boss is as, bull in a china shop as Trump is. So, I mean, Vance has signed up for a ride. He gets assigned things without asking for them that are thankless tasks.
And he gets to live in a beautiful mansion for at least 4 years, right? So, Dan McLaughlin, thank you so much for joining us once again. Folks, follow him on X at BaseballCrank and also at nationalreview.com. Breaking Battlegrounds will be back on the air next week, but make sure to go to breakingbattlegrounds.vote, sign up for the podcast.
Hi, kids.
Remember your dreams? All the future plans you made? Has private student loan debt destroyed those dreams? It doesn't have to. Why Refi refinances distressed or defaulted private student loans that others won't touch. They can reduce your payment, you can get your life back, and they don't even care what your credit score is. Don't let private student loan debt ruin your life. Call Why Refi today. Let's go!
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. This is the special bonus podcast edition. Look, we have a special guest, a friend of mine. We have Kaylee Ray, who is a former Utah State volleyball captain, who led her team to forfeit against San Jose State in 2024, protesting a trans athlete on the San Jose State team. Kaylee, in case you don't know, it was quite the trending topic on X, spoke at the Arizona Senate Education Committee hearing to lobby support about protecting women's sports from biological males, and she had a little back and forth with Arizona Liberal State Senator Catherine Miranda, who attacked Kaylee by saying, quote, "I have my sports hat on now. It's all about sports mentality. Growing up in sports, being a tomboy, I mean, you look pretty healthy. I played against girls that look like you. You look very much in shape and strong." The whole thing was weird. So, Kaylee, welcome to the show and talking to us about this subject.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm happy to continue to talk about this topic. It's one really near and dear to my heart.
So tell people first of all, people don't understand the time it takes to become a D1 athlete. So explain to people, you did volleyball. When did you take it up? How did you end up at Utah State? Tell us a little bit about it because it takes a lot to be a D1 college athlete.
Yeah, I actually come from a family of athletes. My father played Division I basketball. Always wanted us in sports when we were little. I started playing volleyball around the age of 8. And my dad, very invested in my development as an athlete, put me in all different kinds of camps and clinics. I started playing club volleyball when I was 10 years old. And I participated in club volleyball all up until the age of 18, which is, especially as you get into the higher and higher age groups, it's a commitment. There's nothing else going on in my life but volleyball. This is hours of training every single day, taking up all my time on the weekends. I really didn't have much of a social life in high school because so much of my time was dedicated to volleyball. Um, Parents obviously made great sacrifices to be able to afford to have me in club volleyball. Additional training on the side, strength and conditioning programs, watching film, breaking things down with coaches. It is so hard to fully capture in words exactly the type of dedication, time, and sacrifice that goes into developing into the athlete that can perform at a Division I level. I knew that I wanted to play volleyball in college from the very beginning. And as it was something my dad had done, and I had seen like how that affected him and the relationships he made. So it was always a goal of mine. It was always a dream. And to be able to earn a scholarship at the Division I level was pretty special for me and a
Yeah,
huge part of my
yeah,
story.
it's a big deal. What did competing at the college level teach you about fairness and competition? Because that's going to lead us into our topic. But what did you learn about it?
Right on. I learned that fairness and safety have to be foremost in any sporting event and category. Over the summers, we would, in training, all the athletes would be on campus. We'd have Wednesday night beach volleyball where we'd get a bunch of football boys to come out and play with us. And even in those little just for fun games, it's so obvious that males have physical advantages that women do not. Men who have not played volleyball, have not trained nearly as long as we have, can jump out of the gym and, hit the ball super hard. So it was very obvious to me from the beginning that safety and fairness are incredibly important, especially at an elite level where the sanctity of competition should and the integrity of competition should be valued and put first.
So when you were at Utah State, you're the captain of the volleyball team, and you find out you're playing San Jose State that has a trans athlete on the squad. What was your first reaction? What were your teammates' reactions to this? Does this seem odd at first, or did it bring on an instant reaction from everybody?
Well, we had kind of had our own thoughts and speculations about this player from the time we first played against him, which was in the year 2022. So at that time, the information that this was a biological male was not confirmed to us. But it was clear from watching film and playing
Right.
against this individual that there were physical advantages and differences that were just so superior to any of the other female athletes in the gym. It was hard not to notice. So we had ideas and made comments amongst ourselves, but we didn't know for certain until the end of 2023 season, right before they were about to come play us at home. We had again been commenting on the fact that this person was very masculine presenting, and our coach at the time confirmed to us like he had been friends with the current San Jose State coach at that time and had told us, no, this person is transgender. And at that time, we had an administrator come in and talk to us and say no derogatory comments would be tolerated if anybody, fans, players, whoever it was during competition, said anything about that player, they would be immediately ejected. So already we learn this knowledge and we're immediately silenced. Like nobody's allowed to say anything. We have to make it a safe space for that male player. Um, and I ask, what about the safety of the women competing? So at that time, that's when a feeling started to take place in myself and especially amongst my teammates that we don't matter. Our safety, the fairness of our game does not matter as much as this male's identity, and validating that identity. So that was in 2023, and it didn't become public knowledge until the summer of 2024, when it was officially confirmed to us. And at that point, we knew that we needed to say something about this. It wasn't okay. Not one person on my team agreed that a biological man should be competing in a women's category. So luckily, my team was very united. I know other teams across the conference were not, very split on the issue. People want to say we need to be inclusive and be compassionate. But I ask you again, where's the compassion for the women who are playing and the women who sacrificed so much to get there and the women who sacrificed so much and didn't get there? So at that time, my team was very united, and it was obvious that that was the right moment to take a stand. And while it was incredibly difficult, especially for the seniors that year, to just give up a game, we knew that ultimately we were doing the right thing.
Well, it was. Did you get much pushback from students on campus?
Not so much on campus. Luckily, my senior year, I had a lot of online classes, so I think that helped. I actually had a lot of professors reach out to me in support of the decision.
That's great.
Yeah, it was definitely more outpouring of love and support than not, because you and I would both agree this is a very common sense issue, and people with common sense would agree that there are categories for a reason, and we have to compete in those categories to maintain safety and fairness. I got a lot of hate on social media, but the keyboard warriors can't. We can't
Yeah,
hide
the
truth.
problem is half of that is just trolls and bots, so you can't even
Yeah.
take it serious. And I hope you have learned not to read the comments. That's an
I have learned.
that's an important thing for your mental health. I try to tell every political candidate I work with never to read it. They always ignore me. Then they tell me a year later I should have listened to me.
Yep.
You had a hearing at the Arizona Senate Education Committee, and why don't you talk a little bit about the bill you were testifying about and how people can get involved in that? But how did you feel with Senator Catherine Miranda, a Democrat? What was going through your head when she came back at you like that?
Well, like you said, I was there testifying on behalf of HCR 2003, which, for those who don't know, this is going to designate sports categories into male, female, and co-ed, with, of course, based on your biological sex. In addition to that, it further strengthens the protections on private spaces like locker rooms and bathrooms. So obviously, this is an incredibly important thing. When Senator Miranda began her questioning by commenting on my appearance, saying I looked fit and strong and that she has played against girls like me, whatever that means, I was absolutely thrown off guard. I thought this had nothing to do with the topic of the bill. This was not what we were here to talk about. I had given my testimony, explained my experience. And then for her to look me in the eyes and ask how competitive I really am for not wanting to compete against a biological male, absurd doesn't even begin to describe it. I couldn't believe that was genuinely her line of questioning. It just really showed her ignorance as well. This
Well,
has nothing to do
she
with
was purely a high school athlete. I mean, she's comparing when I played baseball with kids in Little League, right? I mean,
Yeah.
she does not have any folks. She did this liberal state senator had no D1 college athletic experience. She doesn't even know what she's talking about on the subject.
Not at all, but even then, even her competing, I believe she competed in basketball in high school. If she had played against a biological male then, I'm sure she would feel differently. The reality is she benefited from a women's category. She got to compete in high school and benefited having a safe and fair environment in a women's category. And to pull up the ladder behind you and say that other girls who don't want to play against boys are just not competitive enough, it's actually pretty sickening.
Yeah, no, I agree. Um, have you had trans people or people from the LBGT community reach out to you and say, "Keep at it"? Have you reached some supportive messaging from the community?
Yes, actually, when I went and spoke in front of the Supreme Court. We had a rally there as the arguments of Little and Hecox and the other one were being heard. So at our rally, it was actually such an incredible experience because so many different groups had come together on this one issue. And we saw like there's groups called Gays Against Groomers, and there were Democrats for, women. They had like feminists for protecting women's sports. There's so many different groups of people, and some of which who were trans. Um, the reality is for those who have competed in sport, you understand the
Right.
advantages and the differences between the sexes. Whether you identify as something else that cannot change who you are biologically. So there has, again, people with common sense, people who understand sport, would agree with me on this that there are categories for a reason, and it's our job to protect those categories.
By the way, have you been amazed through this process that you've learned how many people have groups? There's like the
Yes,
group for everything, isn't there?
there is. I was like, I saw so many different signs and t-shirts, and I was like, oh, all right. I didn't know that was a thing.
We'll have to start our own group. Um, again, will you please explain to our audience in Arizona what this bill does, what's it actually do, and if they're undecided on it, what would you say to them why they should support it?
Yes, I would say for all of our girls and women, not just those in sport, again, like I mentioned earlier, this affects women's private spaces. Um, I listened to the story of a young girl, Adalea Cross. She competed on her middle school track and field team, and with a biological male on her team who sexually harassed her in the locker room. And this is really hard for people to hear, but the reality is this is what's happening. And so for our daughters, sisters, cousins, nieces in Arizona, they deserve these protections. They need these protections. No young woman, no older woman should ever have to feel unsafe in a private space, and especially not in sports competition. Again, we have categories for a reason. This is not an exclusive bill. Everyone gets to participate. Nobody is being banned from sport. We are just ensuring that the categories, the designations stay how they were meant to be, the whole purpose of Title IX, so that every person can have an opportunity to compete and grow and learn, and that those opportunities aren't being taken from young women. This is a very simple bill. And again, it's about protecting our young women. So for those in Arizona, we are hoping that this gets heard on the Senate floor and gets passed, and it will be on the ballot so that it can be voter protected as well.
Well, that's a fantastic. So, Kaylee, we sure appreciate you coming on the show. I know your time is precious. Where can people follow you and keep up with what you're doing?
Yes, the easiest way would be on Instagram. My tag is Kaylee Ray VB, KayleeRayVB. Keeps you updated with everything I'm talking about, and you get to even see little snippets of myself playing. I'm on a little semi-pro team right now, preparing to go play professionally. So, you might see some of that content, but
As they
we're out
should.
here.
As they
Yes.
should. We want to see it. By the way, you have your comments off on Instagram, right?
I don't think I do.
Would you
Do
do
I?
that? Would you do that for me? Turn your comments off.
I'll turn them off.
No, they can like you. No one needs a comment on it, right?
Yeah.
Besides the angry people, the pervs as well. So we want to keep those comments off, okay?
Okay. Okay.
Well, Kaylee, we appreciate you so much going on, and you're just doing a fantastic job, and you're so articulate and love your spine. You can honestly tell you come from a great family, and you're a great character, and we appreciate you being on the show, and we hope to have you on again with us soon.
Thank you guys so much. It's always such a treat to talk with you.
Have a great day, Kaylee, and a
You
weekend.
too.
All right. Well, ladies, that was Breaking Battlegrounds, folks. By the way, ladies, I want to tell you one thing as we were talking about the Pope. So I've had this conversation with friends this morning about Trump's comments about the Pope originally, which were totally out of bounds. He just, Trump just doesn't understand. He just there's certain things that don't need a comment. But understanding the Pope's influence in the United States, 29% of American adults consider it acceptable for the Pope to influence U.S. domestic affairs, which, by the way, most of those are Democrats. 47% find it inappropriate that he comments on American political affairs. So when people think this is going to hurt Trump politically, they'd be wrong. Now, you don't have to like what Trump says. I don't. I just think sometimes he just lets other people take care of things for himself, but it's what he does. But when people think that this is going to be, again, the death sentence for Trump with Catholics, they're wrong. It's not reality. There's no polling backing it. Matter of fact, Democrats are the ones who support an active role by the Pope by 59-19. I mean, basically, Democrats support anybody that attacks Trump. Right?
That's very true.
It could be the devil himself, and they're going to support him. So, folks, we appreciate you joining us at Breaking Battlegrounds, and now we have Bee's Crime, no longer Kylie's Corner. Bee's Crime, you were with us today to do that metamorphosis, and we love it. Are you excited about it?
Yes.
Slogan's already done. We already did it, thanks to the power of AI.
Woo.
Which means we just replaced some graphic artists somewhere. But we can talk
Thanks,
about job
chat.
displacement later. On behalf of Bee's Crime, Sydney, our producer, Jeremy, our engineer and producer, Sam Stone, who left because he got bored, and Chuck Warren. You can follow us wherever you get your podcasts or visit us at breakingbattlegrounds.vote or subscribe to us on Substack. We have some great innovative pieces there all the time. Have a great weekend.